us then to item J3, which is a call for a special work session on November 15th, 2010 for discussion of collection system analysis. And Mr. All, are you speaking?
Mr. Mayor, I'm Sean Finwall and Steve Coomer tonight too. So.
Well, your name is at least on this one.
Yeah, it's on this one. So, Mayor and Council, this is just a continuation of that process. It's certainly not intended for a discussion this evening. It is a purpose of calling a special work session. This is a third Monday and not a normal work session night, so you do need to take action to call for the work session that night. The idea being that you have a discussion of all the information that you received to talk about the next steps of the process, where you want to go, and the time frame, as well as discussion on funding. So we certainly aren't intending to discuss those this evening, simply to call the meeting.
Ms. Ginneman.
I think this is a normal progression, but I have a question for the rest of you. It says a work session for discussion of collection system analysis. That would imply that we're doing the discussing, so we're not going to turn this into some kind of a circus part 2? That's a question.
From my perspective, this workshop would be to, one, receive some analysis from the staff, and then analysis on our part about what we heard at the special meeting that we had, and then staff's part more so than anything would be to discuss what our options would be that are available to us to proceed with if we so desire, and then on our part some discussion about those options and their advantages and disadvantages. And really, since it's a work session, we wouldn't be taking any action. So then we would be directing the staff to bring the information back to a council meeting where we would take action of, or at least presumably could take action. So,
thank you.
So I don't see it as a another public meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Nephew?
The one question I have is, it being a workshop, if the consensus of the council is that we want to call the public hearing for consideration of a resolution of intent, is that something that we could simply have by consensus through the process of the workshop, a decision on that, or would we have to have an agenda item at an upcoming meeting to then make a motion to call for a resolution of intent?
Mr. Cantrud.
We can't do that at a workshop?
Resolution of intent as opposed to, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first half of that.
Well, the statutory process says that we have to call a public hearing in order to consider a resolution of intent to organize to begin the process. And so my question is, would that be able to be the next meeting after this workshop where we discuss the information we've had, or would we have to have this workshop and then have another item in which we consider whether or not to call the public hearing for consideration of the resolution to intent, which would then be at a third meeting?
You can get away with it in 2.
We can do
as long as you're calling it at some point, I think you're fine.
We can't do it at a workshop, can we?
Mayor and Council, I think staff's intent in bringing this forward is that the workshop is to talk about those specific items and debate that. It is clearly our staff recommendation, not sure the city attorney here, that you will have to put another item on the agenda for calling of the resolution. You cannot do that by consensus. Right. You will have to adopt that resolution at a regular meeting, and that either being in the next meeting or another one in December or January, depending upon how you determine best in the process and if additional information is needed before you consider that resolution.
To be clear, you mean regular meeting in the sense of a council meeting versus workshop?
Correct.
It has to be the second or fourth.
It would have to be we've really got, after this November 15th, we were going to have 2 more meetings in 2010.
So I guess then the question that I have is there any reason that we couldn't call this as a special meeting instead of a workshop so that we could make that decision at this meeting as to, we wouldn't have to, presumably we'd need to know what times would be available for the public hearing, but if we wanted to do it, Is there any reason that we shouldn't be able to have that at the end of this meeting? We've received all kinds of information from people, and I mean, we haven't had a chance to discuss it amongst ourselves yet, but Mr. All has some response, I think.
Mr. Mayor and Council, from the staff standpoint, what we'd like to do, get the staff has really not had their time to present to the council. We want to use the work session to explore some of the options before you have that resolution in front of you, and also to have the interaction of the council to kind of download. You had a number of people speak, a number of issues that are there. For you as a council to interact with the staff and do that before you have the vote on calling that resolution. So our suggestion to you is to use that work session time on the 15th to have that interaction and then bring the item back again at one of the regular meetings, and not to have that considered this on the 15th. That allows us to have that staff to give you some of our thoughts of how the process may work, to talk about timeframes, to talk about funding, to talk about how we're going to staff this and what the impacts are to us, to allow us to have that interaction with you as a council.
So from the staff standpoint, you wouldn't, without having that workshop, you wouldn't feel that you're in a position to have the necessary details for when a hearing could be called and things of that sort, because you wouldn't have the whole timetable sort of figured out.
Mr. Mayor and council member, that is true. We want to have that interaction. We want to be sure the staff knows clearly the direction of the council, make sure the council has acted in a unified format. You as a council need to, we feel as a staff, before you have that vote on the resolution, have this discussion, and then get on the same page as the staff.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I then would make a motion that we call for a special work session on November 15th at 5:15 p.m. for discussion of collection system analysis.
Second.
So I made the motion. Sounded like Mr. Nephew seconding. Any further discussion necessary? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's ayes all.
Just a caution, there is a ENRC meeting at 7, so our discussion will be over before that.
Yes, we'll have only a certain amount of time to discuss.
We really do that night. Unless ENRC wants to sit on our laps or something.
All right, that brings us to the visitor presentations. And so if Mr. Schilling wants to get up and address us.